You're listening to A Man of His Word, a podcast for those that don't just want to read the Bible, they want to live by it. There's a story about a pastor who visited a man who had stopped coming to church. They sat together by a fire, and without saying a word, the pastor reaches out with a fire poker and separated one glowing coal from the rest. And in just a few minutes, that coal faded and went cold. And after a while, the pastor stood up to leave, and the man nodded and said, "I'll be back on Sunday." We were never meant to burn alone. And yet, this lie of isolation convinces us that we're safer in silence. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the lie that we're safer in silence, and we're going to call each other back to the fire. So welcome back to A Man of His Word. I'm Bob Dyer. This is the No Frills podcast for Christian men who are tired of white knuckling their faith alone. And so we're confronting one of the enemy's most effective strategies, and that is the lie of isolation. Genesis 2:18 says, "It's not good that man should be alone." Now that's not just about marriage. It's a foundational truth about our design. From the beginning, man was made for relationship with God and with others. And yet this shadow man that we've been talking about, he whispers the opposite. He says, "You've got this, don't show weakness. Keep everything to yourself, keep your struggles to yourself." But God says, that's not good. It's not good. So how does this show up in our lives? Well, we withdraw, emotionally. We become distant from people that love us. And we keep in secret, we keep sin secret to protect our reputation and convince ourselves that no one would understand. And somehow, some way, we spiritualize our independence, call it strength. And the problem is, for too many of us, that isolation feels safe, but it's a setup for collapse. So we have to go to the Word like we do every episode, and Ecclesiastes and Hebrews gives us some good wisdom with this. Ecclesiastes 4, verse 10 says, "Woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up." And then we're followed, if you look at Hebrews 10:25, says, "Do not neglect meeting together," and goes on to say, "but encourage one another." You can't be encouraged by another unless you're not with another. The problem with us too often as men is that we think we're just called to be tough, to gut it out. But the Bible doesn't call us to be tough. It really calls us to be together. You don't need a crowd. You need a brother. Someone who knows you, who walks with you and calls you out if needed. Iron doesn't sharpen iron in isolation. Iron by itself is just going to rust. But isolation, breathes life into the shadow man, keeping him alive. And the shadow man thrives in silence. And in the gaps between meetings, he thrives. In the "I'm good" lies, in the fake accountability groups where no one's really honest, and he grows stronger the longer you hide. And it's no wonder that we sometimes feel miserable, because we know that the shadow man has more control. But once you start telling the truth, he loses ground. And when you invite another man in, he starts to die. So, how do we move towards community, towards brotherhood? You know, we have to recognize and realize that isolation is not strength, it's liability. It's a it's an invisible weight. It's that invisible gorilla that's sitting on top of you. It's a liability. So we've got to reach out, and talk about what's real. And that's the thing I find that too many men don't do. And I'm right there with you. It's hard for me to do that. But I have found that I feel freer, I feel lighter, and I feel more in community when I'm sharing something that is real. And I have the blessing to have uh, developed relationships uh, to that end for my good. And, it's got to be truth telling. And maybe you need to take the initiative and develop a group of truth telling men, but also to ask for help and not apologize for it. My wife has a saying that says, we need to turn our sorries into thank yous. And that's what guys do. We're sorry to ask for help, or we feel like we shouldn't, that we should have everything under control. But when someone comes to help us, we should just say thank you. And then I think we got to be aware of the busyness that we find ourselves in, or the fake toughness that keeps us from real brotherhood. I'm busy. I can't make that meeting, or I can't make that session, or that retreat, or whatever, you know. So who really knows what's going on in your life? Consider that. Who knows really what's going on in your life? Now, you might say my wife or close family members. And those are fine, but are they people that you trust outside? Because you don't want to burden your wife with every detail. That's not what she's made for. Yes, she's a helpmate, but she's also not God. And so we need others to share this with, especially other men who know what's going on in my life. They know what I'm struggling with, where my victories are, even. And then, remember, focus on the passages we've talked about. Genesis 2:18, Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12, Hebrews 10:24 to 25. Focus on those. And then, you know, don't forget, in isolation, we don't contact anybody. We think we can, solve our problems. But we're just, it's like they always say, if you are your own lawyer, you've got an idiot, to something to that effect. So we have to text or call someone and say, hey, can we talk? I don't want to do life alone anymore. And I have found the most beneficial times have been when I talk to guys, believers. We just go to coffee. We just get coffee and we talk about life, and I'm able to share with them and they share with me. And, it seems like a cliche, but we really do life together, because when you're alone, you're not making any ground. So when you're talking to a friend, don't make it fake, but really get down to how each of us are really. And when asked that question, be prepared to answer honestly. You never meant to stand alone. I mean, Jesus himself surrounded himself by brothers. I mean, David had Jonathan, Paul had Barnabas. So don't believe the lie that says you're better off solo. I mean, even the Lone Ranger had Tonto. So if this stirs something in you, you know, take steps, act on it, pray through this, get in the Word, get in fellowship. And I hope that you're in church and pass this on because there's a lot of men that you're probably familiar with that you know that might be suffering in silence. So next time we're going to continue with the live performance. So until then, show up, link arms, and be a man of his word. I'll see you next time.